Garrett is planning to kill you today using your peanut allergy, my daughter-in-law whispered, on what should have been the happiest morning of my life, my son's wedding day. I was expecting a celebration of family love, but instead discovered my golden boy, my heir to a $50 million empire, had already paid $10,000 to ensure I'd never see another sunrise. So I made one phone call. They had no idea this was just the beginning. You see, they thought I was just a trusting father who would crumble under betrayal. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that I had resources they never expected, and secrets about our family that would destroy everything they believed about bloodlines, loyalty, and who really held the power. By the time the wedding cake was cut, they would discover I wasn't the victim. I was the one in control, and their perfect plan had become their perfect downfall. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I'm Roland Thorne, and at 58, I thought I knew everything about Loyalty Family and the empire I'd built. Thorne Industries had grown from a small Charleston firm into a $50 million legacy, one I'd spent decades preparing my son Garrett to inherit. But sometimes the people closest to us harbor the darkest secrets, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The nightmare started at exactly 6 o'clock on what should have been the happiest morning of my life, my son's wedding day. I jerked awake in the master bedroom of our historic Charleston mansion, cold sweat dampening the Egyptian cotton sheets. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Celeste, my beloved wife, who'd been gone for 4 years, stood at the foot of our bed in her favorite blue dress, her face etched with an urgency I'd never seen in life. Roland, she'd whispered, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that still made my chest ache. Danger comes with joy today. Trust your instincts. Trust no one else. I sat up, running trembling fingers through my graying hair. Dreams of Celeste weren't unusual. Grief counselors had warned me about that. But this felt different, more like a warning than a memory. The autumn mist outside our bedroom windows seemed thicker than usual, casting strange shadows across the antique furniture we'd collected together during 28 years of marriage. By 6:15, I'd given up on sleep and padded down the mahogany-paneled hallway to my home office. That's when I found it, a cream-colored envelope that had been slipped under the door sometime during the night. My name was written across the front, in block letters, the handwriting unfamiliar and deliberately disguised. Inside, just 4 words on expensive cardstock: trust no one today. My blood chilled. The paper felt heavy, expensive, not some random prank. Someone with resources had delivered this message. Someone who knew where I lived, how to bypass our security system, and most importantly, someone who wanted me afraid on my son's wedding day. I immediately checked the security cameras from my office computer, scrolling through hours of footage from every angle of the property. Nothing. No movement, no shadows, no indication of how that envelope had appeared. Either our system had malfunctioned, or someone with sophisticated knowledge had circumvented it entirely. The phone rang at 6:30. Sharp, the shrill sound making me jump despite my business training in staying calm under pressure. Cordelia Hayes' name appeared on the caller ID, my family attorney, a sharp woman who'd been handling Thorne Industries' legal affairs for over a decade. Roland, her voice was tight with an urgency that immediately put me on alert. Cancel everything. We need to talk before the wedding. Cordelia, it's 6:30 in the morning. What could possibly... I found something about Garrett. She interrupted, her professional composure cracking. Something that changes everything. I've been investigating for months in what I discovered. Roland, you're not safe today. The warning note in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 2 separate sources, both telling me the same thing. Danger was coming, and it involved my son's wedding day. What kind of investigation? I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. The kind that reveals who people really are when they think no one is watching, Cordelia replied grimly. I'm coming over now. Don't trust anyone until I get there. And Roland. That includes family. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the mysterious warning, the impossible security breach, and the growing certainty that my perfect family was built on foundations far more fragile than I'd ever imagined. Outside Charleston was waking up to what promised to be a beautiful October day. Inside our mansion, shadows seemed to gather in corners they'd never touched before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Celeste's warning dream had been less about grief and more about prophecy. Something was coming, something that would test everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. At exactly 7 o'clock, I heard a car door slam in the circular driveway. Through the office window, I watched Vivian Cross stumble toward the front entrance, her usually perfect composure completely shattered. Her wedding dress bag lay forgotten in the passenger seat of her silver BMW, and even from a distance I could see her hands trembling as she fumbled with her keys. This wasn't the confident young woman who'd been my executive assistant for 3 years before falling in love with my son. This wasn't the poised bride-to-be who'd handled every wedding detail with military precision. This was someone running from something terrible. Mr. Thorne. Her voice cracked as she appeared in my office doorway. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. I need to tell you something about Garrett, something that's going to destroy you. I gestured to the leather chair across from my desk, the same chair where she'd sat countless times, discussing business matters, never imagining we'd be having this conversation. Vivian, what's wrong? You look terrified. She collapsed into the chair, her whole body shaking. For a moment she just stared at her hands, gathering courage for words that clearly didn't want to come. Garrett is planning to kill you today, she whispered finally, the words hitting me like physical blows. During the reception, he's going to use your peanut allergy. The office seemed to tilt around me. What did you say? Your son, the man I'm supposed to marry in 7 hours, wants you dead by midnight. Tears streamed down her face. I heard him on the phone last night finalizing the details with someone named Jasper Whitlock from the catering company. I shot up from my chair, the leather creaking in protest. That's impossible. You're talking about my son, Vivian. My son who's never disappointed me, who's brilliant and successful, and who owes $400,000 to very dangerous people, she interrupted. Gambling debts that started small in college and spiraled completely out of control. These aren't Vegas casinos, Mr. Thorne. These are loan sharks who showed me pictures of what they do to people who don't pay. $400,000. The number echoed in my head like a death sentence. As VP of Marketing. Garrett made good money, around $200,000 annually, but that kind of debt would take years to pay off legitimately. Why not come to me for help? I asked. Though even as the words left my mouth, I suspected the answer. Because you'd make him face consequences, Vivian said simply. You'd want to know how it happened. You'd want him to get help for the addiction. You'd want to restructure his life. He'd rather kill you than disappoint you. The devastating logic of it hit me like a sledgehammer. My son, whom I'd raised to value integrity above all else, had chosen murder over admitting weakness. Show me proof, I demanded, my business instincts taking over despite the emotional chaos. Vivian pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I recorded everything I could. She played an audio file, and my son's voice filled the room, cold and calculating in a way I'd never heard before. The powder goes on his dessert during the reception. He has a severe peanut allergy. It'll look like cross-contamination. 10,000 cash when it's done, just like we discussed. Another voice responded, What if someone sees me? They won't. Everyone will be drunk and celebrating. My father will be dead within minutes, and I'll inherit everything. $2.5 million in life insurance alone, plus full control of the company. The recording ended. I stared at the phone in horror, listening to my son plan my murder with the same tone he used to discuss quarterly reports. There's more, Vivian said quietly. She showed me text messages on her phone, threats from unknown numbers, photos of her walking to work, warnings about what would happen if Garrett didn't pay by the wedding date. They've been terrorizing me for 3 weeks, she explained. Black cars following me home, strange men in the lobby of my apartment building. They made it clear that if Garrett doesn't pay, we both disappear. Why didn't you go to the police? With what threats from unknown numbers? Photos that could be coincidental. And even if they arrested the debt collectors, Garrett would still owe the money to someone else equally dangerous. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I chose you over him, Mr. Thorne. That has to mean something. I looked at this brave young woman who could have run but chose to save me instead. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're the closest thing to a father I've ever had, she said simply, and some things are more important than love. The office door opened, and Cordelia Hayes appeared with a leather briefcase, her face grim with purpose. Roland, she said, her voice heavy with additional bad news. We need to talk about what else I discovered about your son. Cordelia Hayes entered my office with the measured stride of someone carrying devastating news. At 55, she'd been practicing law long enough to perfect the art of delivering life-altering information with professional composure, but I could see the emotional toll in the tight lines around her eyes. Roland, she said, setting her leather briefcase on the mahogany desk with deliberate precision. What Vivian just told you about the murder plot is only the beginning. I've been conducting my own investigation for the past 6 months, and what I've discovered will change everything you think you know about your family. She opened the briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder, her movements methodical despite the tremor in her hands. 6 months ago, Garrett's behaviors started raising red flags during our quarterly business reviews. Inconsistencies in reports, defensive responses to routine questions, financial discrepancies that didn't add up. What kind of discrepancies? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. $800,000 in embezzled funds over the past 18 months, she replied, spreading documents across my desk. Falsified expense reports, redirected client payments, unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts. Your son has been systematically stealing from Thorn Industries to fund his gambling addiction. The papers swam before my eyes. Bank statements forged, signatures altered financial records. $800,000, nearly 16% of our annual revenue, siphoned away by the son I'd trusted with the company's future. But that's not the worst of it, Cordelia continued, her voice growing heavier. The financial irregularities made me suspicious about other aspects of Garrett's life, so I decided to investigate further. Roland, I need you to prepare yourself for something that's going to shatter your understanding of your family. She pulled out a sealed envelope marked Confidential DNA Analysis Results. 6 months ago, I ordered DNA testing using samples from Garrett's medical records and your own from the company's executive health program. Her hand shook slightly as she opened the envelope. Roland Garrett is not your biological son. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the desk, feeling the solid mahogany beneath my palms, needing something real and stable in a world that was suddenly spinning out of control. That's impossible, I whispered. Celeste would never. The DNA results are conclusive, Cordelia interrupted gently. 0 probability of paternal relationship. I had the test run 3 times by different laboratories to be absolutely certain. I stared at the scientific documentation, the cold numbers that reduced 32 years of fatherhood to statistical impossibility. Who? The word came out as barely a croak. Cordelia's expression grew even more pained. I've spent months investigating that question. Cross-referencing dates, reviewing old photographs, tracking down witnesses from that time period. She pulled out another folder. Marcus Blackwood. The name hit me like lightning. Marcus Blackwood. My former business partner, the man who tried to destroy Thorn Industries 15 years ago in a bitter corporate battle that had nearly bankrupted us both. Your wife had an affair with your biggest business rival, Cordelia said quietly. The dates aligned perfectly with Garrett's conception. Marcus is his biological father. I felt something fundamental break inside me. Not just my heart, but my entire sense of reality. The son I'd raised, loved, and prepared to inherit my legacy was not only planning my murder, he wasn't even my son. He was the offspring of the man who'd spent years trying to destroy everything I'd built. Your wife betrayed you twice, Cordelia said, her legal training warring with genuine sympathy. In life and in death. She never told you the truth about Garrett's paternity, and now the son planning your murder isn't even your son. The irony was so cruel it was almost poetic. I'd spent 3 decades pouring my love, wisdom, and resources into raising my enemy's child, only to have that child grow up to plan my assassination. Does Marcus know? I asked. I believe so. The timing of his recent return to Charleston just months before the wedding suggests he's been planning something. This may be his ultimate revenge, watching his son destroy you from the inside. Before I could process this revelation fully, my phone rang. The caller ID showed only unknown number. I looked at Cordelia and Vivian, both watching me with expressions of dread, and answered. Mr. Thorne, a cold, unfamiliar voice said. We need to talk about your real son. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling as I reached for the receiver. After everything Cordelia had just revealed, the DNA results, the embezzlement, Marcus Blackwood's connection, I wasn't sure I could handle another devastating revelation. But the voice on the other end had mentioned my real son, and despite my shattered state parental instinct compelled me to answer. Put it on speaker, Cordelia whispered, her legal training kicking in. We need witnesses to whatever this is. I pressed the speaker button, and a cold, professionally menacing voice filled my office. Mr. Roland Thorne, the caller said with the measured tone of someone accustomed to delivering threats. My name is Silas Blackmeyer. I represent certain financial interests that your, shall we say, adopted son has failed to satisfy. Who is this? I demanded, though my voice came out weaker than I intended. I'm the man who's been trying to collect $400,000 from Garrett Blackwood. Yes, Blackwood, not Thorne, for the past 6 months. But today, Mr. Thorne, we're calling about a different matter entirely. His voice carried a cruel satisfaction. We have your real son. The words hit me like a physical blow. Vivian gasped and Cordelia's face went white. That's impossible, I said. I don't have another. Oh, but you do, Silas interrupted smoothly. 25 years old, goes by Dylan Cross. Ring any bells? No, well, that's because his mother never told you she was pregnant when she left Charleston all those years ago. Kept it a secret, raised him herself, but the boy's been curious about his father his whole life. My mind raced through memories trying to place the name, the timeline. 25 years ago, there had been someone briefly during a difficult period in my marriage to Celeste, but she'd moved away, and I'd never heard from her again. You're lying, I said, though doubt was already creeping in. My phone buzzed with an incoming message. The photo that appeared on the screen made my blood freeze. A young man bound to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, his face bruised but clearly visible. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same strong jawline I saw in the mirror, the same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to his mouth that had defined the Thorne men for generations. $5 million, Silas continued as I stared at the photo in horror. Wire transfer to an account I'll provide. You have until midnight tonight. $5 million, I choked out. That's 10% of your net worth according to our research. Painful but manageable for a man of your resources. His voice turned even colder. Here's where it gets interesting, Mr. Thorne. The son you never knew exists will die for the son who isn't yours. Poetic justice, don't you think? Cordelia leaned forward, her legal instincts engaged, despite the emotional chaos. This is kidnapping a federal crime. The FBI will find a corpse if they get involved, Silas cut her off. No police, no FBI, no clever legal maneuvering, just a simple business transaction. $5 million for your real son's life. And if I refuse, I asked, though I already knew I couldn't, then Dylan Cross dies, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you chose money over the son who actually shares your blood. But here's the beautiful part. The wedding proceeds as planned. You smile, you walk Garrett down the aisle, you celebrate the marriage of your attempted murderer. Because if you cancel, if you act like anything is wrong, both sons die. The cruel logic was perfect. I had to choose between my money and my real son's life, all while pretending to celebrate the fake son who wanted me dead. You have 16 hours to decide which family matters more, Silas continued. The son who isn't yours but tried to kill you, or the son who is yours but you never knew existed. I'll call back at noon with wire transfer details. Wait, I started, but the line went dead. The office fell into stunned silence. Vivian was crying quietly. Cordelia was furiously taking notes, and I was staring at the photo of a son I'd never known I had. A son who was going to die unless I paid $5 million, while simultaneously stopping another son from murdering me. Roland, Cordelia said quietly, we need to call the FBI. He said both sons die if we involve law enforcement, I replied numbly. Then what do we do? Vivian asked through her tears. I looked at the photo again at the young man who had my eyes and my stubborn chin, who'd grown up without a father because I'd never known he existed. Then I thought about Garrett, the son who wasn't mine but who I'd loved for 32 years, who was planning to kill me in less than 12 hours. We saved them both, I said finally. Somehow we saved them both. The silence that followed my declaration to save both sons stretched for nearly a full minute. Then Vivian's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and painful. I can't do this anymore, she whispered through her tears. I can't keep lying to you, not after everything you've just learned, not when you're facing an impossible choice because of secrets I've been keeping. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. A steely professionalism beneath the emotional turmoil, a trained competence that went far beyond her role as an executive assistant. Roland, my name is FBI Special Agent Vivian Cross, Insurance Fraud Division. She said, her voice steadying as she shifted into what I now recognized as her true professional mode. I've been undercover for the past 6 months, investigating Garrett's embezzlement of company funds. The revelation hit me like another physical blow. After everything else, the murder plot, the DNA results, the kidnapping, learning that the woman I'd considered a daughter had been deceiving me all along felt like the final betrayal. Your FBI, I managed to choke out. The insurance company that covers Thorne Industries flagged suspicious claims. Patterns 18 months ago, she explained, her training taking over. large expense reports, unusual travel claims, patterns that suggested systematic fraud. When they couldn't get satisfactory answers through normal channels, they contacted the Bureau. Cordelia leaned forward, her legal mind engaging despite the emotional chaos. How long have you known about the embezzlement? We had solid evidence within 3 months, Vivian replied. 800,000 in fraudulent claims, falsified documents, money laundering through offshore accounts. We were building an airtight case for prosecution. But you didn't know about the murder plot? I said, trying to process this new layer of deception. God, no, she said emphatically. The gambling debts, the creditor threats, that all emerged in the past few weeks. When I heard Garrett on that phone call planning your death, everything changed. This wasn't just about financial crimes anymore. She pulled out what looked like a standard smartphone, but pressed a sequence of buttons that transformed it into something far more sophisticated. Jasper Whitlock has been cooperating with us for the past month. He's wearing a wire recording everything. We have Garrett on tape discussing the murder plot, the payment arrangements, the method. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope. The FBI has evidence, enough to prosecute for conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, and racketeering, she confirmed. Jasper was desperate, gambling debts of his own threats against his daughters. When we approached him, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity and witness protection. So you can arrest Garrett before the wedding? Cordelia asked. Vivian's expression grew troubled. That's where it gets complicated. The FBI doesn't know about Dylan's kidnapping. My cover required complete communication blackout during the final phase of the operation. As far as my handlers know, we're proceeding with a standard financial crimes bust. The hope I'd felt moments earlier began to fade. So you can't call for backup. Not without revealing the kidnapping situation, which the kidnappers specifically said would result in Dylan's death, she replied grimly. Roland, I've been lying about everything except one thing. My feelings for you as a father figure are completely real. This investigation became personal months ago. She reached across the desk and took my hand. When I first went undercover, you were just another Target's family member. But you treated me with such kindness, such genuine care. You became the father I never had, and watching Garrett plan your murder while knowing what a good man you are, it's been tearing me apart. I studied her face, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The professional competence I'd admired, the emotional intelligence, the way she'd handled crisis situations. It all made sense now. What resources do we have? I asked. Limited, she admitted. I can't contact my team without compromising Dylan's safety, but Jasper is still in position, still recording. We have surveillance equipment, some tactical support, and most importantly, we have the element of surprise. Garrett doesn't know you're FBI. He thinks I'm just a loyal fiancé who got cold feet about the murder plot. He has no idea I'm a federal agent who's been building a case against him for months. I looked at my watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock. The wedding was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon, with the reception immediately following. Dylan's ransom deadline was midnight. We have 5 hours to coordinate an FBI operation with a kidnapping rescue. I said the impossibility of the situation weighing heavily on me. We can do this, Vivian said with quiet conviction, but we need to be smart about it. One operation to save Dylan, another to stop Garrett, and somehow we have to make sure neither interferes with the other. Cordelia was already reaching for her phone. I'm calling in every favor I have. Private security, legal resources, whatever we need. As I watched these 2 remarkable women prepare to help me save both my sons, one I'd never known existed, one who'd never been mine at all, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood or genetics. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to stand with you when everything falls apart. By 9 o'clock, my office had transformed into something resembling a military command center. Cordelia had spread legal documents across every available surface Vivian had set up, what looked like a sophisticated communications hub with encrypted phones and laptops, and I found myself at the center of an operation more complex than any business deal I'd ever orchestrated. All right, Vivian said, her FBI training now fully evident as she took charge of the tactical planning. We have 2 separate but interconnected operations. Operation 1, prevent Garrett's murder attempt and gather evidence for prosecution. Operation 2, secure Dylan's safe return without alerting the kidnappers to law enforcement involvement. She pulled up a detailed floor plan of the wedding venue on her laptop. The reception hall has multiple entry points, service corridors, and a catering prep area where Jasper will be positioned. We need eyes on every angle. Cordelia looked up from her legal briefs. I've been in contact with Judge Morrison. We have emergency warrants prepared for Garrett's arrest, search warrants for his residence and office, and asset freezing orders to prevent him from accessing funds to flee. What about the kidnapping? I asked, the image of Dylan bound in that warehouse still burning in my mind. That's where it gets delicate, Vivian replied. I can't officially involve my FBI team without compromising Dylan's safety. But I have unofficial resources. Former colleagues who owe me favors, private security contractors with federal experience. At 9:30, she established a secure connection with Jasper Whitlock. His voice came through the encrypted speaker, tight with nervous energy. Mr. Thorne, he said, I want you to know how sorry I am about all this. When Garrett first approached me, I thought it was just about making you sick, maybe missing part of the reception. I never knew about the allergy severity. I understand, Jasper, I replied. What's important now is stopping this and making sure no one gets hurt. The poison is exactly where Garrett said it would be, Jasper continued, hidden under the main dessert table. I've been wearing the FBI wire for 3 weeks now, recording everything. We have him on tape discussing payment timing method. Everything. Vivian leaned forward. Jasper, we need you to maintain your position, but switch the poison for harmless powder. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? Already done, he replied with what sounded like relief. I replaced it with powdered sugar 3 days ago. If Garrett checks, it looks identical, but it won't hurt anyone. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuine hope. So the murder attempt will fail. The murder attempt will be caught on camera with full audio, Vivian confirmed. Jasper's wire surveillance cameras and multiple witnesses. We'll have everything we need for an airtight prosecution. By 10 o'clock, the operation was taking shape with military precision. Vivian had deployed a surveillance team to monitor the wedding venue. Evidence technicians were positioned to document every aspect of the attempted poisoning, and her unofficial contacts were tracking leads on Dylan's location. The beauty of this plan, she explained, is that we're letting Garrett incriminate himself completely. He thinks everything is proceeding normally. He has no idea we've neutralized his weapon, and he'll walk right into our trap. Cordelia had been working her own network of contacts. I've arranged for private security to discreetly monitor all entrances and exits. If this Silas Blackmeyer or any of his associates show up, we'll know immediately. What about the ransom? I asked. We're prepared to make the wire transfer if necessary, she replied. But Vivian's people are confident they can locate Dylan before the midnight deadline. At 10:30, I made the decision that would define the rest of the day. Looking at these two remarkable women who had chosen to stand with me despite everything, Vivian, who had risked her cover to save my life, and Cordelia, who had uncovered devastating truths to protect me, I realized what family really meant. The wedding proceeds as planned, I announced. We trust the plan, we trust each other, and we focus on saving both my sons. Both? Cordelia asked. Dylan, who shares my blood but grew up without knowing me, and Garrett, who doesn't share my blood, but I raised as my own for 32 years. I looked at each of them. We save them both, or we save neither. Today we prove that family is built by choice, not blood. Vivian smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all morning. That's exactly what real family does. They choose each other, especially when it's difficult. The team is in position, she continued, checking her secure phone. Surveillance is active, Jasper is ready. Arrest warrants are prepared, and we have leads on Dylan's location. Everyone knows their role. As we prepared to leave for the wedding venue, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this morning began. Confidence. Not just in the plan, but in the people who had chosen to stand with me. Blood might have betrayed me, but choice had created something stronger. Gentlemen, I said, looking at the command center we'd created, let's go save my family. The clock on my desk read 11:00 a.m. In 3 hours, I would walk down the aisle with a son planning my murder. In 13 hours, I would either have saved both my sons or lost them forever. But for the first time today, I believed we could actually pull this off. At exactly 2 o'clock, under a canopy of ancient Charleston oaks, draped with white silk, I walked my son down the aisle toward what should have been the happiest moment of his life. Instead, I was escorting a would-be murderer to his own trap, surrounded by 250 guests who had no idea they were about to witness the most elaborate sting operation in Charleston's history. Garrett looked magnificent in his black tuxedo, every inch the successful heir to a business empire. He smiled and nodded to guests, shook hands with groomsmen, and played his part with the same charm that had fooled me for 32 years. Only now I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the way he checked his watch, the subtle tension in his shoulders as he anticipated the evening's deadly finale. Dad, he said during a quiet moment as we waited for the ceremony to begin, thank you for everything, for raising me, for building this empire, for accepting Vivian into the family. I promise I'll make you proud. The irony was so crushing I almost couldn't maintain my composure. Here was a young man thanking me for a lifetime of love and guidance, all while planning to murder me in a few hours. But I'd learned something about acting in the past few hours, and I managed to smile like the proud father everyone expected to see. I know you will, son, I replied, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. Vivienne looked breathtaking as she walked down the aisle in her flowing white gown, but I could see the subtle bulge of the FBI wire beneath the silk bodice, could catch the slight tension in her smile as she scanned the crowd for potential threats. To everyone else, she was a radiant bride. To me, she was a federal agent walking into the most dangerous undercover operation of her career. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly, but I spent every moment cataloging details that the other guests couldn't see. FBI agents disguised as waitstaff, positioned throughout the venue, Cordelia's security contractors, mingling with the crowd surveillance cameras, hidden among the floral arrangements. What looked like a fairy tale wedding was actually a carefully orchestrated trap. At 3 o'clock as the reception began, I noticed the photographer for the first time. He was young, maybe 25, with an intensity that went beyond professional dedication. While other vendors worked efficiently in the background, this photographer seemed personally invested in capturing every moment, particularly any shot that included me. There was something familiar about his profile, the way he held his head, the determined set of his jaw. But with everything else happening, I filed the observation away and focused on maintaining my performance as the happy father of the groom. Magnificent ceremony, Cordelia whispered as she appeared at my elbow during the cocktail hour. Everyone's in position. Jasper confirms the substitution is complete. Vivian's wire is transmitting clearly, and we have visual confirmation on all exit points. Any sign of our uninvited guests? I asked quietly. Not yet, but they're here somewhere. Men like Silas Blackmire don't make empty threats. As if summoned by her words, I caught a glimpse of a figure in the shadows near the garden entrance, tall, silver-haired, watching the festivities with the detached interest of a predator studying prey. Marcus Blackwood had come to watch his son destroy me. Cordelia, I murmured, 10 o'clock by the garden entrance. She turned casually, her trained eye immediately spotting what I'd seen. I'll alert security, but we can't move on him without risking the operation. I know, I replied grimly. Let him watch. Let him think he's winning. The reception continued with surreal normalcy. Guests laughed and danced, toasted the happy couple, and celebrated what they believed was the union of two people in love. Meanwhile, Garrett worked the room with practiced ease, accepting congratulations while mentally counting down to murder. Vivian smiled and chatted with relatives while coordinating with federal agents through coded phrases. And I played the proud patriarch while watching my family's enemies gather in the shadows. At 4:30, I overheard Marcus speaking quietly to someone near the catering entrance, his voice carrying just far enough for me to catch a few words. Beautiful ceremony. Shame about what happens next. The casual cruelty in his tone made my blood run cold, but it also strengthened my resolve. This man had orchestrated decades of betrayal, seducing my wife, corrupting my son, and now planning to watch that son commit patricide. But he'd underestimated the power of chosen family, the strength that comes from people who decide to stand together against the darkness. As evening approached and the dinner service began, I felt the tension ratchet up another notch. Jasper moved efficiently between the kitchen and dining room, his FBI wire capturing every interaction with Garrett, every detail of the murder plot. The photographer continued his intense documentation, somehow managing to be everywhere at once, his camera capturing angles and moments that seemed almost prophetic. Mr. Thorne, one of the catering supervisors, approached me at 5:45. We'll be serving dessert in 15 minutes. Is there anything special you'd like us to announce? I looked around at the scene, my fake son preparing to kill me, my real son unknowingly documenting it, all my chosen daughter risking her life to save mine, and my oldest friend coordinating the most complex legal operation of her career. Just that family is the most precious gift we have, I said quietly. And sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. As the dessert service began, I realized that everything we'd planned, everything we'd risked, was about to be put to the ultimate test. The next hour would determine whether justice prevailed, or whether Marcus Blackwood's decades-long revenge would finally succeed. But looking around at the people who'd chosen to stand with me, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Not just hope, but certainty. We were going to win. At exactly 7 o'clock, as the dessert service began with elegant silver trays and crystal champagne flutes, I watched Jasper Whitlock, approached the main dessert table with the steady composure of a man who'd found his courage. His hands no longer trembled as he reached beneath the pristine white tablecloth, retrieving the small container that Garrett believed held my death. From my position near the head table, I could see everything. Jasper's careful movements, Garrett's eager anticipation as he watched from across the room, Vivian's subtle hand signals coordinating with the FBI surveillance team. What should have been the moment of my murder instead became the moment of my son's complete self-incrimination. Jasper approached my designated dessert plate with the powdered sugar that had replaced Garrett's poison, and I watched calmly as he sprinkled what everyone believed was my death sentence onto the elegant chocolate mousse. The FBI cameras captured every moment, every gesture, every piece of evidence that would ensure justice. But before I could even pretend to take a bite, the young photographer I'd noticed throughout the day suddenly appeared beside my chair, his professional equipment forgotten, as he knelt down with an intensity that made the entire room fade into background noise. "Mr. Thorne," he said quietly, his voice carrying a tremor of emotion that had nothing to do with professional nervousness. "I need to tell you something before this goes any further. I'm Dylan Cross. I'm your son." The words hit me like lightning. Here, in the middle of what I'd believed was an elaborate rescue operation, was the young man I'd seen bound and threatened in that horrific photograph. But he wasn't kidnapped. He was free, he was safe, and he was standing right beside me. "The kidnapping," I started, "was fake," he said quickly, my eyes filled with years of questions and longing. "I've been investigating our family for months, trying to understand who my father was, why my mother never told you about me. When I learned about tonight about what Garrett was planning, I couldn't stay away. The resemblance was unmistakable now that I was looking for it. The stubborn jawline, the determined set of his shoulders, the way he held his head when he was thinking. All mirror images of my own mannerisms. I've been watching you my whole life," Dylan continued, his voice breaking slightly, "hoping you were the father I deserved, praying that someday I'd have the courage to introduce myself. I never imagined it would be like this." Before I could respond, before I could process this miraculous revelation, a slow clap echoed through the reception hall. The conversations died, the music stopped, and 250 guests turned toward the source of the sound. Marcus Blackwood stepped out of the shadows near the garden entrance, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers, his face wearing an expression of cruel satisfaction that made my blood run cold. "Surprise, old friend," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence. "What a touching family reunion, though I'm afraid the boy's got his facts a bit mixed up." He walked toward us with the confident stride of a man who believed he held all the cards, his eyes moving between Dylan and me with calculated malice. "Meet your real family, Roland," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with decades of bitter revenge. "Both boys are mine, Dylan Cross and Garrett Blackwood, both products of my relationships with women who were supposed to be yours." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Dylan's face went white, his hand instinctively reaching for mine as if to anchor himself against this devastating truth. "That's impossible," Dylan whispered. "DNA doesn't lie, son," Marcus replied with cruel gentleness. "Your mother, Sarah Cross, had a brief affair with me 26 years ago, right around the time she was seeing Roland. She never told either of us the truth, but I've had my suspicions for years." He turned his attention to the stunned wedding guests, many of whom were now reaching for their phones to record this unprecedented drama. "And Garrett, of course, is the product of my longer relationship with Celeste Thorne. Your perfect family? Roland was built on my wife's lies and my genetic legacy." The cruel irony was devastating. I'd spent the day believing I was saving two sons, one who shared my blood and one who didn't. Now I was learning that neither boy was mine biologically, but both had been shaped by Marcus Blackwood's manipulations. "Your revenge," I said quietly, finally understanding the scope of his decades-long plan. "My masterpiece," he corrected. 30 years of planning. I seduced your wife, fathered your heir, corrupted him into a murderer, and arranged for my other son to watch you die. The perfect destruction of Roland Thorne, killed by one son while the other documents every moment." Dylan stood up slowly, his photographer's eyes still working even as his world collapsed around him. "You're saying I came here to document my father's murder by my brother?" "Half-brother," Marcus corrected with satisfaction. "And yes, that was exactly the plan, until you developed inconvenient feelings of family loyalty." The reception hall was completely silent, now 250 witnesses to the most twisted family revelation in Charleston's history. Garrett stood frozen near the bar, his face a mask of shock and growing horror, as he realized his murder plot had become a public confession. But as I looked around at the devastation Marcus had wrought, at the two young men who'd been pawns in his revenge game at the woman who'd risked everything to save me, I felt something unexpected. Not despair, but clarity. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," I said, standing to face the man who'd spent 3 decades destroying my life. "DNA doesn't lie, but neither does choice." As Marcus Blackwood finished his cruel revelation, savoring what he believed was his moment of ultimate triumph, I saw Vivian give an almost imperceptible nod toward the catering staff. Suddenly, the waiters and photographers throughout the reception hall revealed themselves to be exactly what they'd been all along: FBI agents with badges, weapons, and arrest warrants. FBI agent Vivian Cross announced, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence. "Marcus Blackwood, Garrett Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and fraud." The transformation was immediate and professional. Within seconds, the fairy tale wedding reception had become a federal crime scene, with 250 guests serving as witnesses to the most elaborate sting operation in Charleston's history. Marcus's face went from triumphant satisfaction to shocked rage as 2 agents flanked him, reading his Miranda rights with calm precision. "This is impossible," he snarled. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Vivian replied, holding up her FBI badge for all to see. 6 months of undercover investigation, wire recordings, financial documentation, and now public confession in front of 250 witnesses. I'd say we have an airtight case. But it was Garrett's reaction that truly broke my heart. As the agents approached him, my son, the young man I'd raised and loved for 32 years, regardless of his genetics, collapsed completely. The charming facade that had fooled everyone, including me, crumbled like a house of cards. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, falling to his knees in front of the entire wedding party. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I never wanted to hurt you. The gambling, the debts, the threats. They said they'd kill Vivian if I didn't pay. I thought, if you were gone, I could inherit everything, pay them off, and we could start fresh." His public breakdown was devastating to witness. This was the little boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, the teenager I'd helped with homework, the young man I'd groomed to take over the family business. DNA might not have made him my son, but love and time certainly had. They told me it would look like an accident. Garrett continued through his tears, his confession echoing through the silent hall. "Cross-contamination from your allergy. I convinced myself it wasn't really murder, just bad luck that would solve all our problems." The FBI agents waited patiently as he incriminated himself further, their cameras and recording equipment, capturing every word for the prosecution that would follow. As the arrests continued, I noticed Jasper Whitlock standing near the catering station, his face a mixture of relief and terror. Vivian approached him with surprising gentleness. "Mr. Whitlock," she said publicly, "your cooperation with this investigation has been noted and appreciated. The immunity agreement stands and witness protection has been arranged for you and your daughters." The relief that flooded his face was profound. Here was a man who'd made terrible choices out of desperation, but had found the courage to do the right thing when it mattered most. As the immediate chaos of arrests and evidence collection continued around us, I realized that 250 people were waiting for some kind of explanation, some way to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. I walked to the microphone that had been set up for wedding toasts and looked out at the sea of shocked faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected, "I know what you've seen tonight challenges everything we traditionally believe about family. You've watched me discover that the son I raised isn't my biological child, and that the son I never knew existed isn't either." I paused, looking at Dylan, who stood near the photographer's station with tears in his eyes and a camera still hanging around his neck. "But you've also witnessed something more important than genetics," I continued. "You've seen people choose to stand together when it would have been easier to walk away. Vivian risked her life and career to save mine. Cordelia uncovered painful truths to protect our family. Jasper found the courage to do right by his daughters." I gestured toward Dylan, and he walked slowly toward me, his resemblance to Marcus now unmistakable, but his character entirely his own. This young man spent his life wondering about his father, and when he learned I was in danger, he chose to protect me rather than document my destruction. I choose this man as my son, not because of blood, but because of character. I put my arm around Dylan's shoulders, feeling the rightness of it, despite everything we'd learned about genetics and betrayal. "Today you witness that family is built by love, not genetics," I told the crowd. "It's built by the choices we make, the loyalty we show, and the courage we find when the people we care about need us most." The applause started slowly. then built into something that felt like community approval, like Charleston society itself, acknowledging that sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. As the FBI led Marcus and Garrett away in handcuffs, as the crime scene technicians documented evidence as the most elaborate wedding reception in Charleston's history became the most talked about criminal prosecution, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. The future was uncertain. Healing would take time, and there would be legal proceedings and media attention and 1,000 complications to navigate. But standing there with my chosen family, Dylan, Vivian, and Cordelia, I knew we would face whatever came next together. 3 months later, I sat in the Thorne Industries boardroom, watching Dylan review the quarterly reports with the same analytical precision I'd once admired in Garrett. The legal proceedings had concluded with justice served. Marcus sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy and racketeering, Garrett receiving 12 years with the possibility of parole for cooperation and genuine remorse. The business had not only survived the scandal, but emerged stronger. Charleston's business community, initially shocked by the revelations, had rallied around the truth that family loyalty transcends genetics. Our clients respected the integrity we'd shown in exposing corruption within our own ranks. The insurance settlement came through. Dylan reported, his voice carrying the confidence that had developed over months of learning the business from the ground up. Full restitution for the embezzled funds plus damages. We're actually in better financial shape than before this all began. That evening, we gathered around the dining room table that had once hosted formal business dinners: Roland, Dylan, Vivian, and Cordelia. The adoption papers had been signed that afternoon, officially making Dylan Thorne my legal heir and Vivian my legal daughter. What had been chosen family was now recognized family, bound by law as well as love. I never imagined family dinner could feel this peaceful, Vivian said, her FBI badge now retired in favor of a position as Thorne Industries Chief Security Officer. After months of deception and undercover work, just being ourselves feels like a luxury. Dylan raised his wine glass, his photographer's eye still capturing moments, but now for family memories rather than evidence. To the father who chose me when he could have walked away, and to the sister who risked everything to save us all. The Charleston community had embraced our unconventional family story with surprising warmth. Southern society, I'd learned, valued character over bloodline, loyalty over genetics. The wedding that had begun as a celebration and become a crime scene was now remembered as the day Charleston witnessed that love truly does conquer all. You know what I've learned, I said, looking around the table at the faces that had become my true legacy. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. Garrett will always be the boy I raised and loved, regardless of his choices or his genetics. But you two chose to stand with me when everything fell apart, and that choice created something stronger than any biological bond. Cordelia, now not just our attorney, but our family friend, smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd helped write a happy ending. The legal precedent is fascinating. 3 separate adoptions, all based on demonstrated loyalty rather than traditional family structures. I suspect we'll see more cases like this in the future. As I reflected on the journey from that ominous morning 6 months ago to this peaceful evening, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about betrayal or justice or even family. It was about choice. Every day we choose who we trust, who we support, who we call family. Those choices repeated over time create bonds stronger than genetics, loyalty deeper than blood love, more enduring than any biological connection. The best inheritance I can give, I told Dylan and Vivian, isn't money or property or even a business empire. It's the truth about what family really means. It means showing up when someone needs you. It means choosing courage over comfort. It means building something together that's stronger than what any of us could create alone. Looking around that table at the family we'd chosen and fought for and legally formalized, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete peace. The future was bright, the legacy was secure, and the next generation understood that the most valuable things in life aren't inherited through DNA, but earned through character. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest losses. Sometimes the family we need isn't the family we're born into, but the family we're brave enough to choose. Looking back on this devastating journey, I've learned that betrayal stories like mine serve a greater purpose in God's plan. They teach us that trust must be earned through actions, not just words, and that the Lord places guardian angels in our path when we need them most. Just as God protected me through Vivian's courage and Dylan's loyalty, He shows us that family isn't defined by blood alone. These painful betrayal stories remind us that evil can hide behind the most charming smiles and perfect facades. Grandpa's stories passed down through generations always emphasize the same divine truth. Character is revealed in crisis, not comfort. When we face our darkest moments, God reveals who truly loves us and who merely uses us. The most profound Grandpa stories teach us that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes protecting those we love means holding them accountable for their choices, even when it breaks our hearts. Through this nightmare, I discovered that real family chooses to stay when others choose to betray. Betrayal stories hurt, but they also heal by showing us who deserves our trust. God's wisdom transforms our pain into discernment, our losses into lessons. The grandpa stories worth sharing are those that prove chosen family, built on loyalty and love, is often stronger than blood, family built on genetics alone. These grandpa stories remind us that with God's guidance, we can rebuild from betrayal and create something more beautiful than what was destroyed. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced God's protection through chosen family? Your story might inspire someone facing their own betrayal. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more powerful stories that remind us of divine love and redemption.